that's one of the misconceptions is strength training is important. It's no doubt important, but if that's all you're doing in the gym, chances are you're missing out on a big part of what it is you're actually looking to accomplish, whether it is performance based or it's just health and wellness based. Conditioning and aerobic training, all these things, they're essential to it.
Hello, and welcome to the Physical Preparation Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Robertson, and I'll be joined on the line later today by world-renowned conditioning expert, Joel Jamieson. Now, before we jump into this week's episode, I want to give you a quick recap of what's going on in my neck of the woods, a little deep thought for you to marinate on, and then we will jump in to this amazing episode. So, what's going on here? Man, pretty slow week overall. It felt a little bit more hectic than usual. The family farm that we grew up in. If you don't know, my parents owned a horseback riding farm, stable, whatever you want to call it, for, 30 some years, something like that. They are actually getting ready to sell it. So when they were up in December, we wanted to hang out. Didn't get to happen because of the whole COVID thing, but they came up, winterized it. So they asked me to go up and check it out so it would pass inspection. And needless to say, it did not go quite like I would have expected. I started warming up the apartment and, running the water and testing everything out. And we had a water filter leak and we had a leak under the main kitchen faucet. So needless to say, it was more eventful than I would have expected. Luckily, got a plumber out there, got everything squared away, and haven't heard back from them yet. But hopefully the inspection went well and their barn will be off the market here very shortly because it's become a hassle at this point. They moved to Florida about 5 years ago now. So the fact that they are not here and they've had renters and, it's been unoccupied for about the last 6-7 months. It's kind of time for them to move on from that. So hopefully I did my part and helped them out a little bit. But that was a big part of the weekend. Scooted back on Saturday as soon as I was done there and everything checked out and got to watch Cade's last basketball game. I think he was ready for it to be done. It's a long season. When we signed up, we're like, wow, this is really like a 4-month commitment. And it's definitely the most lengthy of all of the sports seasons. Soccer is about 2.5 months. Baseball is like 2.5 months. Basketball being 4 months. It's a long season. Now, granted, you got like a 2-week break in there due to Christmas, but it doesn't matter. It's a long year. Very excited for his progress. I don't know if it's his favorite sport. I think he tends to rotate through, whatever sport he's not playing at that time he claims is his favorite. So basketball is finished. And then on Sunday, he actually had like baseball, like tryouts, which I hate the word tryout. Really, they just go and try and get a gauge for their level of competency so they can try and balance the teams. But he seemed super excited about that. And, he didn't get to play last year due to COVID. So I'm excited for him to get out there. He's got good hand-eye coordination, hits left, throws right. So if you're around baseball players, that's kind of like a magic combo. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm just excited for the spring because I'm going to be an assistant coach for him in baseball. I'm going to be a head coach for Kendall in soccer. So I'm excited to get back out there. It's nice having the winter off, but I also enjoy getting out there and just getting time, not just with my kids, but other young kids and trying to help them grow as athletes, as human beings. And it's just something I take a lot away from. So basketball is over. We're moving on. With that being said, it is the All-Star break coming up, and I've already had a couple of my basketball guys reach out. So hopefully that means a few more coaching hours for me over the next week and a half. Excited to see them and figure out how they're doing right now. And then the last big thing for this week is the Complete Coach certification launch is coming up next week. I mean, it's crazy to think about. I generally launch in September and March, and it's just crazy to think like we're there. It is really the second week in March here in just a few days. So excited to push that back out. The big allure, if you will, this time around, I try and add something every time. So I think the big thing this time is just getting CEUs. I know a lot of people had requested in the past for me to get NSCA CEUs. Didn't know if I could pull it off. So very excited to offer those now. I mean, if you finish the cert, you get 2.0 NSCA CEUs. And my wife's a dietitian and she's like, 2, that doesn't sound like much, because in their world, it's like per hour. And I had to explain to her, like 2.0 is like 20 credit hours. So she's like, oh yeah, that makes a lot more sense. So the great thing about that is you don't have to take any other course this year. You could take the certification, get the CEUs for it, and you're basically good for NSCA CEUs for the entire 2021 year. So excited about that, and then just excited to see what I'm going to do with it next. I've got some different ideas as far as things I might want to freshen up, like a new freshen up as far as the core training principles I use or the single leg stuff. I thought about maybe adding an entire module on online training, because obviously that seems to be a thing now. I don't think that's going away anytime soon. So all kinds of ideas as to where I'm going to take it and what I'm going to continue to add in the future. But excited to get the launch done next week and hopefully, get a handful of new people that are excited to learn more and help their clients and their athletes get better results. So that is what's new. Before we jump into the show, though, I want to give you a little insight. And so I had a discussion with one of my athletes today, amazing young woman that I have just a ton of respect for, very mature for her age. And she is very much a planner. And I can relate to this because I'm very much a planner as well. I like to have like a vision for where I'm going in life, what my future is going to look like. And so we had this discussion because I think almost to her detriment, she wanted to have everything planned. And I had to explain to her, okay, planning is okay, but I think what's more important than planning is having a general vision for yourself. And this applies not only to life, but to training as well. That's why I love this stuff. Like training and life, the analogies are just infinite. But the way I tried to describe this to her was, look, you need to have a general vision for the kind of life you want to live, right? Maybe the profession that you want, the kind of significant other you're going to be with, where you want to live, like general things like that. But at the same time, you have to give yourself wiggle room. You have to give yourself freedom because sometimes opportunities come up or things come up, both positive and negative, that you can't always control. So you have to have some malleability when it comes to this. And I think training is in a lot of ways the same. So when I'm laying out a training program for a client, maybe I have this, say, 3-month vision, and the first, say, 2 weeks are sketched out pretty strongly. But that's about it. That's it. And, back in the day when I was getting started, there were these pieces of software where you could lay out not just training, blocks, like 3-week blocks, or like 3-month blocks, but annual programs, quadrennial programs for like Olympic caliber athletes. And I think now we realize, look, man, we don't know how a client's going to look tomorrow, let alone in the next month or in the next year. But that's where this idea of having a vision comes in. You can't just go willy-nilly and just wing it the whole time. You have a general vision for how you want things to look, the general maybe structure that you want to have, or maybe the general goals you want to achieve, but you have to be flexible in your approach. So just something to think about, when it comes to training or life, because we talk about both on this show. Have a general vision for where you want to go and how you think you'll get there. But at the same time, don't get too caught up in planning because you can't control things months, if not years down the line. Have the vision, start putting the pieces in motion, and then you just got to take it a couple weeks and every couple months at a time. So that is my thought for the day. I hope it helps you out a little bit. Now, without any further ado, quick break, and then we're going to jump into this awesome episode with my guy, Joel Jamieson. One thing Bill Hartman and I have talked about for years now is the power of mentorship. Early on, I didn't have a mentor to shape or guide me, or most importantly, help me find the blind spots in my own training and coaching. But luckily, after many years of trial and error, I found Bill, and my professional success exploded as a result. But the downside to the mentorship process, at least professionally, is that it can be pricey. For private mentees that I work with, it costs anywhere from $3.99 to $5.99 per month to work together. And while I know the results go far beyond that price, the fact of the matter is that just won't work for a lot of folks. So when Bill and I sat down a while back, we asked ourselves a really tough question. How can we help shape the future of the industry and truly make it great? And beyond that, how can we create amazing content yet make it affordable to virtually every trainer or coach out there? And the answer for us was simple: restart iFast University. Here's what you'll get when you become a member of iFast University. One update each month from myself and Bill. This could cover anything from improving exercise technique to writing better programs and everything in between. Twice per month Q&As, where Bill and I will personally answer your questions to help you become better at training, coaching, or even running your fitness business. A Facebook group where you'll be surrounded by like-minded trainers and coaches who are serious about getting better, and access to the iFastU archives, where you'll be able to watch literally hundreds of pieces of content from the iFast team over the years. This blend of content and Q&A is specifically designed to help make you the best trainer or coach possible. If you're interested in learning more, head on over to ifastuniversity.com to get signed on. We'd love to have you on board. Joel Jamieson is a true pioneer in the physical preparation world. Not only has he redefined how we think about and approach conditioning, but he's also one of the best when it comes to merging technology with training. And perhaps even more importantly, he's a great friend and someone whose work I truly admire. In this show, Joel and I talk about why he wrote his first book, Ultimate MMA Conditioning, the difference between fitness and conditioning, why conditioning research is fatally flawed, ways you can spice up your long-duration cardio, and what the future of tech looks like in fitness. I've had Joel on the show a few times now, and I don't know if he was well-rested, optimally caffeinated, or what, but this was far and away the best show we've ever had together. But enough for me, let's do this. Joel, man, thanks so much for coming on the show here today. Super excited to have you back on. Could you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my fitness journey started a long time ago, way back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Started at the University of Washington under a great strength coach named Bill Gillespie, who's one strong son of a bitch. I heard he just did a 1,000-pound bench, and the guy's 60 plus years old. So he's the first person that's ever benched 1,000 over the age of 60. And,
wow.
Back then he was not quite that strong, but he was still massively strong. He was a great guy, fun to work out with. Went from there to the Seahawks for a little bit, interned there, and then opened up my own gym back in 2003. And kind of at the time, I was doing a lot of the same stuff that most strength coaches do. I was a strength and power oriented coach. That's what I learned how to do and was good at. And then I just happened to open my gym next to an MMA gym where I had to start learning how to train these guys from a conditioning standpoint. Because I realized really quickly that when I started actually trying to train with them myself, I just realized how poor my own conditioning was and how little I actually knew about conditioning. And so my career took a big turn towards energy system and conditioning. So over the years, I studied that. I dove into that. I wrote a book in 2009, as Ultimate MMA Conditioning, that did really well and caught on to a bunch of different circles outside of MMA. Technology is something that's played a big role in my career. I started using something called the Omega Wave even before I opened the gym. So I think around 2000 or so, 2001, I was introduced to really the first fitness tech out there that was used, for high-level athletes. And it was a $35,000 heart rate variability system that was developed by the Russians. But it was really just the earliest of fitness tech. And so I started using that as a young coach, and it showed me all kinds of insights I would never have had otherwise. So over the years, I've kind of had this intersection of technology and managing recovery as a result of that, and conditioning, and expanded out from just combat athletes into a lot of different sports, and been able to leverage my background from both the strength and power side and the conditioning side. I've been fortunate to work with a lot of big organizations out there and see how the big companies do. I worked with Lifetime Fitness for quite a while and built certification content for all their coaches. I had a big partnership with Gold's Gym, done a lot of various things with different military special forces groups. So yeah, it's been a hell of a journey. I've done a lot of different things in the fitness industry that I probably never expected to. I kind of thought I was just going to open my gym and train football players back in the day. And, took some twists and turns, and I was lucky to do a lot more than just that, and be exposed to a lot of different areas, meet a lot of great people, and help out a lot of coaches and just athletes and other people along the way. So like I said, not what I expected the direction to go, but I'm certainly glad that it did.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. So one thing I want to ask you, I don't know if I've ever heard like a definitive answer on this, and we've been friends for quite a while now, but what prompted you originally to write your Ultimate MMA Conditioning book, which I will still say is one of my top 5 strength and conditioning books of all time?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny if you never heard the story, because it is actually kind of funny. So at the time, I'd been training lots of combat athletes, particularly at a very high level, for a number of years. I wrote MMA Conditioning in 2009, I believe it was. But at the time, my mom had suffered a stroke, and the repercussions of that were, she was able to move and talk, but she had lost a huge amount of her mobility, and it was not a very good time in my life, because dealing with that was very hard. And I was sitting around at the gym, just kind of depressed, honestly. And I was coming home at night, and it was a hard time. And so anyway, I was just kind of literally surfing the internet one night, and I came across this fighting internet forum called SureDog, and there was a big post about strength conditioning in this forum. There was lots of posts about strength conditioning, and so it was like 2 a.m. and I'm just kind of sitting there on my couch and I'm reading through all these posts, and there was just a lot of really, really bad information about combat sports conditioning. And the people were generally well-meaning, but they were just kind of armchair quarterbacks talking about conditioning for fighters, and I got the feeling that a lot of them didn't even train the sport themselves. And so I just created this account and I made this post, and I didn't really put much thought into it, but basically the title was like how to solve your conditioning problem. And, I just kind of hastily threw this post that was basically like, hey, I've read through a lot of posts. I see a lot of holes in the logic here. And here's the way that you guys need to actually approach conditioning. And I wrote a fairly lengthy post. And I didn't think much of it. Like I said, I probably should have put a little more thought into it, or should maybe introduce myself. I definitely did not introduce myself and my experience. I just kind of made this post. And so I went to sleep. The next day I woke up and I just checked it, and I just got absolutely blasted by all these people on the forum because they've been around, for years. Like, oh, who the hell's this noob? Like, screw you. Shit.
Noob.
So basically I just got absolutely blasted by these guys. And so I was like, oh, I could just kind of let it go. I generally tend to not let it go when people are calling me out. So I politely responded with, well, here's why you're wrong. And I started this kind of huge back and forth with people. And then, I didn't want to just come out and say, here's who I've trained. Like, I don't know. It sounded, I just didn't want to do it. So
right.
I just kind of kept arguing basically, more or less. And then it kept the thread going. I mean, it was getting a ton of views because it was just turned to like one giant argument of everybody against me, basically. And so eventually there was another guy who was a moderator in the forum, and he worked out at AMC Pink Creation where I trained all the fighters. And he kind of came on. He saw this. I didn't even talk to him about it. He just saw it. And he said, hey, you guys might want to listen. Like, here's a list of all the guys that this poster has trained. He works with Matt Hume's guys. He's trained Rich Franklin. He trained Chris Liebman. He trained Sakurai. He trained all these guys that I trained. I trained probably 5-10 world champions at this point. But I was completely under the radar, so nobody knew who I was. I didn't have a website. I wasn't posted anywhere until that point. Like, I was just, at that point, I trained those guys, but I had no name whatsoever. And so all of a sudden, the tone of the conversation changed, like, instantly, right? Now with everyone telling me I'm an idiot and moron and swearing at me and telling me to get off the forum to asking me questions and, wanting to be my best friend, because all of a sudden they realized I was actually who I was talking about. And so it just turned around, and this forum went from, just this late night post I made to, like, I think it had 400 or 500 threads in a pretty short period of time because everybody started posting. It just turned this massive thing, and the moderators made it sticky. It just turned into this big thing that was getting a ton of attention. So I just kind of realized, like, wow, there's a huge amount of demand for this because there's so much bad information and people want to know the answers. So I said, okay, I'm going to try and create a website and let's see how that does. And so I mean, at that point, I just made 8 weeks out kind of overnight myself. I didn't really know how to build a website, but I figured it out, just the basics of how to create a forum on there. And I said, hey, I've got a forum over 8 weeks out. If you guys want to join there, come over there. Because I was getting sick of posting on SureDog all the time.
Right.
And so all of a sudden I had like 2,000 or 3,000 people join the forum over there, and we kind of kept the whole discussion going. I just kind of created this tiny following really quickly. So at that point, within a few months, I was spending a ton of time on this. Like, I was, spending a couple hours a day answering questions on my forum and trying to, get back to people. And it was really time consuming. I'm like, man, this is taking up a huge amount of my time. Like, and I'm still training people all day, and I'm dealing with my mom and rehab and taking her to doctors. I'm like, I can't keep doing this if I'm not making anything out of it. Like, I like helping people, but I got bills to pay. And so I was like, well, why don't I write a book? And I'd never written a book. Actually, that's not true. I wrote a book for volleyball, but I'd never written a big book.
Right.
So I decided basically I want to write this book, and I'm going to see if people will buy it. So I came up with this idea, which in hindsight was kind of funny. I said, I'm going to write the first half of this book. I'm going to, see how long it takes, and then I'm going to put it up for pre-sale. And if I get enough people interested, then I'm going to finish it. If I don't, then I'll just refund their money. Honestly, I was not sure how many people were going to buy a book from me. I never had sold a book in mass. I just created one for a volleyball class I ran. So I literally wrote the first half of Ultimate Conditioning in about 6 weeks. And, I put it out there for sale on the website, and it sold like 400 copies like overnight, which was a good amount for me.
Yeah.
At $40, $40, it was like 16,000 back then, which, was a good amount of money back then to me.
Yeah.
And especially compared to what I was making training. So I was like, oh shit, I gotta finish this thing, right? And And so it turns out the second half of the book is a whole lot harder to write than the first half of the book. and editing and printing and all these things I didn't take into consideration took forever. And so I had people, people started out very friendly when I was, saying it was delayed, and they started getting less friendly and less friendly the longer the delays went. Because keep in mind, I'd never put a book out there before, right? So right. I mean, they knew I was they were reading my stuff in the forum. Like, I'm sure they knew I knew what I was talking about, but I was taking much longer than I said. I think I told them it was going to take like 4 weeks, and it took like 3 months. Like, it was really, really delayed. And some people were like, "Give me my money back, you thief!" Like, it was not going well, and it wasn't intentional. I kind of realized how much work there was in finishing the book, and I was so intent on making sure it was really well done, and I didn't want to just shortchange and get it out there. So it took me forever to get it done, is the bottom line. But I got it out there, and it caught on pretty quickly, and I started getting a good amount of orders for it really right off the bat. Once people started reading it, and people started reviewing it, and I started getting orders from all kinds of sports outside of combat sports and all sorts of teams, and it grew really quickly from there. So it definitely paid off, but it was not this straightforward process I could speed. No, it was definitely a lot more difficult, a lot more time consuming, but it ultimately worked out. It was just kind of funny how it all started.
Yeah. And I always tell people, like, don't be put off by the name. A lot of people are like, "Oh, I don't train cage fighters." I'm like, you don't need to be a cage fighter. Like, all of the principles in there are relevant to everybody, because I think I've trained exactly one MMA fighter in my career, but I lean on that book for basically every conditioning program I've ever written. So,
yeah, I mean, when I wrote it, that was kind of my idea was, I call it ultimate conditioning because obviously I talk about training combat athletes in there, but I wanted to give any coach any person really, just a better understanding of how energy systems work, how they relate to performance, how you approach them from a training standpoint, and how you progress over time. And there's so much out there on the strength side of the game. I mean, there's endless yes. books on strength training, right? But there's really not much out there if you say, "Hey, I really want to learn how to develop energy systems and I want to train them in an intelligent way." There's textbook style stuff out there where you get the biochemistry, you get into all the stuff that no one really cares about, but there's very little that talks about the actual training side and treating yes. energy systems in a similar way to strength training. So that's essentially what I want to build and what I wrote. And that's, I think, why it did well. Is just there's a big need for it, but there was just very little out there on it.
Absolutely. So while cage fighting might be cool, most of the people that are listening to this probably don't train MMA fighters. So with that being said, why should the gym pop coach put an emphasis on conditioning in their workouts?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is simply that conditioning is really, it's hugely important for every goal, because the way that I define conditioning is maybe a bit different than a lot of people would, but I look at two elements of the whole thing. So I look at what I would call fitness. And fitness are really just things that we can measure through different tests, right? So we can measure your VO2 max. We can measure your resting heart rate, your heart rate variability. On the strength side, we can obviously measure your max strength. We can measure your explosive power. We can measure different movement quality. We can measure all these different things. And I would call essentially all those measures of different types of fitness, right? Like strength is a type of fitness, aerobic training, aerobic metabolism is a type of fitness. But conditioning is really how your body puts all these pieces together to accomplish a goal, to actually apply fitness. So to me, conditioning is applied fitness. And so the example I use is I can go to Home Depot and I can buy all the tools, right? I can get to build a house. Say I want to build a house. I can go get all the tools. I can get all the materials. But if I don't know how to build a house, they're just going to sit there. I'm not going to do anything with them. They're not, right. Not going to serve me any good. So conditioning is really understanding what tools you need to buy. In other words, what types of fitness you need to create or generate or improve. And then it's being able to put those together to accomplish something. So in sports, that's something that's very obvious. You want to win the game. You want to win the division. You want to win the Super Bowl. You want to win the fight. That's the obvious goal of conditioning in sports, is to perform and execute your skills and win. But the reality is, for most people, as you mentioned, who don't want to go punch people in the face or get kicked in the face, they just want to live a longer, healthier, more fulfilled life where they don't have injuries and they feel good and they have energy and all this sort of stuff. Conditioning is the same thing. You want to be able to do that. That's your goal. And you still have to understand what types of fitness to develop. And you still have to understand how do you put those pieces together. So, in particular, aerobic fitness is really the key to both of them in a lot of ways, because the aerobic energy system is what drives 99.99+% of your energy from the moment you're born until the moment you're dead. So the more you can develop that, the higher your chances are of avoiding a lot of diseases, cardiovascular disease and stroke and all the things that kill a third or more of people in the U.S. at least, and most of the world. those things are preventable through aerobic training and through better conditioning, understanding how to deal with stress, understanding how to move more efficiently, understanding how to breathe better, all the things you talked about as well. Those things aren't just for fighters or for athletes. They're really for anybody who, wants to just feel good and live longer and look their best and avoid all the pitfalls of aging and falling apart as you get older. So, it really doesn't matter what your goal is. There's no goal out there where conditioning is not going to play a big role, or where understanding the right types of fitness and how to develop those things is going to be important. Those are always going to be important. So I think that's one of the misconceptions is strength training is important. It's no doubt important. But if that's all you're doing in the gym, chances are you're missing out on a big part of what it is you're actually looking to accomplish, whether it is performance based or it's just health and wellness based. Conditioning and aerobic training, all these things, they're essential to it. So I think everyone has to just have that in their mind as they look at the big picture of their training program.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that's interesting is, I can tell you I was very much like an anti long duration, low intensity guy until I got familiar with your work, until I started to understand the aerobic system better. And I think still to this day, like the long duration, low intensity aerobic work gets a bad rap. So since you are like the conditioning guy, and I feel like you still have your finger on the pulse of this, like, could you talk a little bit about why you think that is? And then maybe just some of the general benefits that people can get from just that low end, lower intensity work?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it gets a bad rap for a lot of reasons. Number one is we love the idea of working harder for shorter and getting the most bang for our buck, so to speak. And we like these big headlines of like, build massive biceps in 3 weeks or double your VO2 max in a month with Tabata. Like, those sound super catchy. No one says like go long and slow for 6 months and you're gradually increased, you'll gradually literally increase the whole time, right?
Right.
That's not exciting, but that's, part of the truth. So I think part of it is just our nature of thinking that like everything has to be very short and very high intensity. And it's reinforced by all these research tidbits. If you put people in a study and you train one group at a higher intensity for 4 weeks and one group at lower intensity for 4 weeks, there's no question the group that trains a higher intensity over those 4 weeks is going to see better results. I mean, it's a greater load in the body, so the body responds with a greater change, and over short periods of time, that's great. But I think the problem is where all of this breaks down is just over the long run. High intensity every day, all day, or a program that's got nothing to high intensity is bound to run into problems, because sooner or later that high load the body accumulates and it becomes more than your body can recover effectively from, and you either plateau if you're lucky, or you start to get injured or you break down. If you're less lucky. Right. So, and we've seen that. I mean, CrossFit is like the best example of that ever. Not to rip on CrossFit, there's benefits and there's good things CrossFit brought to the market, but it was literally CrossFit was the biggest experiment in high intensity training in history. And I think most people that did CrossFit would agree that if you actually followed that sort of program for long, people ran into problems. I mean, CrossFit literally sued the NSCA because they had research showing how many problems it created. So, I mean, I think we understand that, and people inherently get it once they do it themselves. They go into some super high intensity class and they jump in the gym and everything's hard and they walk out of the gym crushed every day. And within a couple of months, either they've stopped training or they're injured, so they've had to stop training. So really, low intensity is it's the counterpoint to that. It is less effective over the short run, but it's more effective over the long run because it allows your body to gradually adapt and improve over a period of time. It doesn't overload the body as much. Now, that said, the other reason I think it gets a bad rap, or why people don't like it, is it can be boring and monotonous in the way that people have traditionally thought about it, right? I mean, people typically think of LSD cardio or whatever you want to call it in the sense of like getting on a treadmill or getting on elliptical and getting on a bike and going for an hour or two, and that is boring. I mean, I don't want to do that for the most part. So I think people have looked at it from the standpoint of, oh, it's boring and it's not as effective as high intensity. I can get 20 minutes intervals and I can be done, or I can sit on a bike for 90 minutes. That's an easy choice. So they're going to opt for the high intensity every time. But a couple things, like high intensity doesn't always have to be as high intensity as people want to make it. And low intensity doesn't have to be as low intensity or boring as people want to make it. So a lot of times the way I'll have people do it is through just different low intensity circuits. So it could be a bike for 10 minutes, could be jump rope for 5 minutes, could be a Stairmaster or VersaClimb or a rope climb, or just changing up the body weight exercises and sleds. I mean, you can vary the movement patterns, and there's actually benefits to varying the movement pattern. So rarely do I have people do much more than 5 or 10 minutes of one exercise before you rotate through the next. You can change it up and you can do all kinds of different movements that make it more exciting, and it doesn't all have to be exactly steady state. You can vary the pacing a bit. So there's ways to make it more exciting, But really, the bottom line is high intensity works in conjunction with low intensity. They shouldn't be this war. It shouldn't be like,
Yeah.
oh, do all one or do all the other. It should be, no, I need a mixture of both. And as my program progresses, that mixture changes. And then as you improve, and as you work through a 6-month block or a year or whatever, you will start to change how much time you're spending on each. You start out spending a bit more time in the low intensity and a bit less time in the high intensity. And as your fitness improves and as you develop the qualities that you need from low intensity, then you can start doing a bit more high intensity. But there's really no program I ever write these days or have in years that doesn't have some of that in there. It's just a question of how much and how you do it and when you do it and all those sorts of things. But we do low intensity work and tempo intervals and stuff that's not super hard, but it's got a lot of benefits for continuing to improve the aerobic system. It's hugely beneficial for recovery. It's got all sorts of things that are causing changes in the heart that are different than the high intensity. It's the counterbalance, and you need both. And like I said, if CrossFit had been CrossFit 3 days a week and the lower intensity model 2 days a week, or vice versa, you would have seen, I think, a lot different result of the experiment. But people just need to get their heads around, like, there is no 4-week magic cure for most people, right?
Right.
There is no 6-week, you're going to get shredded abs and monster cardio in 6 weeks by just crushing yourself for 6 weeks. It'd be great if that worked, but it doesn't. So I think we just have to, people need to shift their mindset a little bit that if you're going to improve something in fitness, it is going to take time, and it's got to be a progression, and it's going to be this gradual improvement over a long period of time that you're going to eventually be way better off than you are right now. But it's not a sprint. It is a longer term marathon, if you will, and you just have to be able to balance your intensity if you're going to survive it and get to the end without crushing yourself, which is why you need both higher, lower, and even some moderate intensity in there.
Yep. It's funny because it's not a perfect analogy, but one of the analogies that I tend to use with the people that I train is that, when you come in the gym, I'm not going to take you in and have you max out on a lift, right? Like, I'm not going to max you out on day one, like on a squat or a bench or a deadlift, but we have no issue doing that with conditioning, right? Like, we'll just crush somebody with conditioning the first day in the gym. Like, it's not a big deal. So that was one of the big things that I tried to relay to people is like, hey, it's not a perfect tit for tat, but I'm not going to crush you day one in the gym when it comes to your strength training. So why would I do that with conditioning, right? Generally,
that's exactly. I mean, imagine if you walk into a gym and someone's like, "Oh, I've got a great strength training program for you. Research has shown that increases your strength in 4 weeks by 80%." You're like, "Awesome! What is it?" All right, we're gonna max out every day.
Yeah, right.
We're gonna 1 rep max squat, 1 rep max pull up, or not pull up, but bench, squat, clean, deadlift, 1 rep max every day for a month. It's awesome. You're gonna love it.
Right.
I mean, the thing is, you would get real strong for a few weeks, and you'd blow some joints, and you'd blow yourself apart. But that's what we're trying to do on the conditioning side. Like, let's go into the gym and just push our heart rate to max every day.
Right. So here's my next question, and I'm really interested in your thoughts on this, because the downside is conditioning isn't like weights in the sense that, if I go in the gym often enough, physically I can see changes in my body, or I can see more weight on the bar. So I get this kind of tangible benefit that I can see, right? But you can't always get that with conditioning. So how do you go about gauging progress with conditioning? Or maybe along those same lines, how do you make it sexy so people will stick with it long enough to see results?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, really our goal is to define what areas of fitness we have to improve for conditioning. For a lot of people, that's going to be the aerobic system. I mean, it's not super often that the anaerobic system is the limitation in your endurance if we look at conditioning from a lot of perspectives for all intents and purposes. So you can measure that in different ways. First we can look at your resting heart rate. That's a very good indicator of your overall general fitness. You can run either, lab tests, which is impractical for most people, or you can run like a 12-minute Cooper's test to estimate your VO2 max. You can look at what I use quite frequently is heart rate recovery. So how quickly your heart rate drops, after you do some kind of exertion-based thing. If you do sprint for a minute, how quickly your heart rate drops after 60 seconds is a really good indicator of your aerobic fitness and your conditioning in a lot of ways. And there's research that even links that recovery to life expectancy because it is correlated to aerobic fitness so well. So we want to look at metrics that we can track. And so I track a lot of those, basically all of those. I track resting heart rate. We track heart rate variability, which is the same concept and correlates extremely well. We'll track basically, how you recover from different exercises. And then we'll track, actual performances and different things throughout the conditioning program. And so that's, again, part of the problem, I think, with conditioning is most people approach it so hectically. It's like there's no structure to it. There's no organization. So what are you really tracking? Because you're not doing the same thing twice half the damn time. So I don't write programs like that. Like if we're going to do, a 4, 6, or 8 week conditioning program, whatever, the program's going to have structure to it where, maybe twice a week, we're going to do a 12-minute timed run and we're going to see basically how far you can go. And then we're going to measure your recovery heart rate right after that. And that's our benchmark. And we want to see continuing improvements in that once a week. We're going to basically use that as a test, the same way you would use maybe a 5 or 10 rep max or whatever in a lifting scenario to see if you're improving. We can look at how far you can go over a certain period of time. It doesn't have to be a run. Let's see your program isn't running. Let's see you are doing like a spin bike, or you're doing a airdyne or a Versa climber. Like start building your workouts around, once a week we're going to do this type of assessment into the workout. It shouldn't be a totally separate part of the workout. Just make it part of the workout.
Right.
So you can progress all these things. I mean, all your training methods within your conditioning program should have progression. You should be going from, 5 minutes to 8 minutes, 8 minutes to 10 minutes. You should be going at this speed up to this speed and that speed up to this speed. I mean, your conditioning program has to have enough structure and consistency to it that you can actually measure what you're doing and making sure that you're progressing. The key is a lot of stuff is it's using heart rate, it's using, machines where you can track distance, and when you put those two together, you can get a lot of information about whether or not you're improving. So, when COVID hit, I wrote an 8-week kind of gym-free at-home program that was all bodyweight stuff. And the simplest thing, from a bodyweight standpoint, it was running. And so, once a week for the first 4 weeks, I had people do like an 8-minute run and see whether or not they're improving. And then we increased the run up to 12 minutes. And every week they were all seeing improvements. Like last week it took me, I went this distance, and then this week I went this distance. So you could see the improvement from week to week dramatically when they were just measuring that. And they could also see their heart rates coming down faster and faster each week. So you just have to build your conditioning program the same way you'd build your strength training program, with exercises and methods that you can measure the progress. But again, if your idea of conditioning is just go in the gym and do some class, or go in the gym and drive my heart rate to maximum, then you have nothing to measure. You can't track improvement very well because you're not doing the same thing twice. You're not doing anything that's measurable. So you just have to build those things into your program and realize that you can actually track all of these things if you build your program in a way that it has, that structure, that capability. And it really, all you have to do is, the same thing at least a couple times a week, and the same thing in a way that's measurable. So either how far you can go in a period of time, or how long it takes you to complete a certain, output, or your heart rates across whatever. There's all sorts of ways to measure this. You just have to actually build this into your program intentionally, versus, again, just going to the gym and training hard and getting your heart rate up. That's fine, but that's not measurable. It's not progressible. That's like the equivalent of just going to the gym and randomly picking up some dumbbells, some barbells, and doing some stuff. Like that's not, it doesn't have the necessary structure or the necessary, it's not really a program, it's just kind of a workout. It's working out. Exactly. I think that's the difference. There's a big difference between a program and a workout. Anyone can write a program. Anybody can go in the gym and work out, anyone can do a workout. Anyone can write a workout. But taking those workouts into a series and making it a program, that's a greater challenge for most people. But that's really what you have to do if you want to progress.
Absolutely. So one of the biggest trends in strength and conditioning right now is the use of tech to help guide your workouts. I know this is a space that you're passionate about. You've done a lot of work in, and I know you've been building and implementing your Morpheus system really for years now. So can you talk a little bit about why you built it and how you can envision it helping improve the effectiveness of whoever is using it, how it can help improve their training sessions?
Yeah. So, first of all, like I mentioned earlier on, the really big reason I developed it is because so early in my career, I was introduced to technology. It's been almost 20 years, probably has been actually 20 years since I was introduced to heart rate variability. And very quickly, I learned just how important having some objective gauge of whether or not people were recovering well and how their bodies were responding to training. It was such a huge piece of the puzzle that I realized early on, if I didn't have that information, there was just a lot of guesswork. Because what I found really quickly was that this is something you see when you really start to dig into day, understand coaching. You have an hour in the gym where you're working out, and that's hugely valuable and important. But you have 23 hours a day outside the gym to either capitalize on it and get the most out of that session, or to completely screw it up, because your sleep, your ability to deal with mental stress, your nutrition, all of these things that happen outside the gym ultimately dictate what becomes of your efforts in the gym. And I can't overstate that enough. The gym itself is the stimulus. It is the opportunity for you to put your body in a challenging environment where it has to adapt and improve. But it's the 23 hours afterwards that govern whether or not that happens. And that's really what I saw early on with technology, because I was training professional football players. I was training, Microsoft executives. I was training high school volleyball athletes. I was training, people that were just stay-at-home parents and whatever. I was training this huge variety of clientele, but the thing I saw, no matter who I was training, was how much sleep was impacting their recovery and their results, how much them being stressed out by a deadline at Microsoft was impacting them, how much, a high school athlete who had finals was impacting them, or who was just under a lot of stress from school or work. I just saw really early on that the make or break of my program was rarely sets and reps in the way that I thought that was. The make or break of my program was what these people did when they left my gym. And that's a hard thing for most coaches to truly deal with, because it's out of your control. And if you don't know what they're doing, if you have no gauge of what they're doing, and you have no idea of how well their body is handling all those things, then again, unfortunately, your only chance is to guess. And you're just making assumptions about their recovery, and you're making assumptions about how their body is reacting. And you don't really know until you measure and see either improvements or plateaus, or you see them break. You're just kind of fumbling your way through it, doing the best you can, but you don't have much information. It'd be like picking stocks without having any information whatsoever about the company.
Right.
You don't know. You're just literally guessing. That's kind of what you're forced to do. And so once I started to look at the data and realize just how important all these things were, I was like, man, I couldn't imagine coaching and training myself or anybody without having access to this data, because it's so valuable. It's telling me how to manage training. It's telling me what's working, what's not. It's helping me pick better exercises and methods and make better choices. It's just more information led to an ability to be a better coach and to write better programs and manage them more effectively. So that's why I created the first system I created was BioForce HRV back in 2011, because I was using this really expensive $35,000 system that was impossible for other people to use, and it was impractical because you had to measure it in my gym. You couldn't take it home, so I wasn't getting as much data as I should. But as technology grew, that became more accessible to everybody. And so the first system, BioForce, was just looking at heart rate variability, which was kind of the end result of all these things happening put together. It did great. It was awesome. Had thousands of people using it. It was massive help. It was one of the first HRV systems. But I still realized, as a coach, I was seeing the end result of someone's sleep and training, nutrition, and all this stuff, but I wasn't seeing the underlying factors and causes, because HRV changes in relation to all those things, but it can't necessarily tell me which one's a limiting factor. And so the whole concept with Morpheus was to tell the whole picture of someone's lifestyle and their training, how they're all coming together. So Morpheus pulls in activity data from whatever activity tracker you're using. It pulls in sleep data from a whole bunch of different sleep trackers. And it gets heart rate variability from our own Morpheus device. It gets your training data from, pretty much any chest strap or heart rate monitor out there. And then it pulls all that data in to give you a recovery score. So you see the end result of what all this stuff is doing. And then it gives you heart rate zones for the day that help you manage your intensity more effectively. So it gives you a low intensity blue zone for recovery, a moderate intensity conditioning zone in the green, and then a high intensity, overload zone in the red. And just kind of helps you realize, how well your body is recovering, and it helps you understand better what different intensities are appropriate for each day and over the course of the week. So my whole goal, like I said, it was just to take all the data, all the things I knew were important, and give people a recovery score, because it's the end result of all these things happening together, and then to help point them in the right direction for conditioning and aerobic fitness by giving them these personalized heart rate zones that change every day as their recovery and their fitness changes. Those zones are going to change. They're dynamic heart rate zones. They don't just stay the same every single day. They adjust based on where you're at. So I just want to give someone, people technology that I had developed as a coach myself that I wanted to use and had used for years, and give them the same access to it, and make it affordable, make it easy to understand, and make it something everybody could use versus only high level coaches that were invested in thousands of dollars into all these things. And so that was really the genesis of the whole concept. And what we're working on now is we've talked about, is to take all this data and share it with coaches so they can see how well their clients are sleeping. They can see how their recovery is. They can see how active they've been. They can see what their heart rates were in the workouts they did yesterday or today, and put all these pieces together from a coaching standpoint. And I think it's the missing element of fitness. I mean, people know nutrition's important, they know sleep's important, but until you actually see all these things impacting your fitness in such a meaningful way, until you actually realize that they are the make or break of your fitness, they're not just these important things, they're the most important things a lot of time. Until you see that, you really can't fully understand or realize it. And as a coach, being able to have access to this data and being able to have these relationships and these discussions with your clients about why they're not seeing results. Maybe it's not your program. Maybe it's the fact they're sleeping 5 hours a night.
Right.
Until you can see that and have discussions, I think you're missing out on a big piece of fitness puzzle. So it's, I think it's a huge part of where our industry needs to go. And I think that's heading that direction. But I think we're going to be one of the first ones out there. We'll be the first ones out there to take all this data and give it to coaches and trainers and gym gyms a meaningful way to make better programs and deliver better results.
Yeah, the thing that I love about this kind of software too, and again, I use Bioforce for quite some time, and the great thing about it is, the old like, oh, we're going to do a deload week this week or whatever, like you really don't even need that as much. You kind of have like your baseline program, and then you have your, oh, okay, you're a little bit beat up or you're a little bit fatigued today. We're going to, adjust your workout in whatever way you prefer, dropping volume, dropping intensity, a combination of the two. So it really makes periodization way more fluid and responsive versus just trying to guess as to where somebody's going to need a deload in their whatever 4 or 6 week cycle.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like basically, I would put it this way: coaching without any data is a very reactive and very guess-based process. You're guessing to what you think is going to happen or what you think is happening, and then you react when something different happens. If somebody gets injured, obviously you react to that. If you retest them and their improvements weren't what you expected, then you react to that. But if we have data coming in and we have information we can use to make decisions, we're making those changes before it gets to the point where people break. We're making changes before it gets to the point where someone spent 8 weeks and didn't really see any progress. We're able to really push someone to the right edge of their capabilities without going over the other side where bad things start to happen. So we just, like I said, it's like anything else. The more information you have and the more information you can actually use in your decision-making process, the greater likelihood those decisions are going to be accurate. They're going to be good decisions. And, like I said, there's just a lot of guesswork that's involved, particularly, if you're a coach and you're working with 20, 30, 40, 50 people. I mean, without some technology behind that, you have no idea what most of those people are doing. You can say, hey, how'd you sleep last night? I mean, the answer doesn't really mean anything because it's not objective. You don't have any real data there, and you're never going to ask that of everyone you train. So I think the key is just making data easy to use and making the whole process simple and fun for the people to use, and then being able to translate that into better coaching, or if you're training yourself, just better decision making. And that's what technology should be doing. There's not always that happening. So that's, my goal is really to bridge that gap between what coaches and what people actually want to see and what they're going to use and how they use it and what's happening. So as a coach, myself that's used technology, I think I've been able to do that in an effective way, and I can translate that a lot better, I think, than some software engineer who came up with an app or a technology that they've never used because they're not a coach or they're not an athlete themselves. I think that's part of our problem is you've had a lot of technology built in the industry by technology people, not by fitness people, coaches like, we are.
So with that being said, talk to me about the future of fitness and tech. So if you could look into your crystal ball and predict the future, where are we going to be at in the next 5 to 10 years when it comes to programming and coaching for our clients?
Yeah, I think we're just going to keep going down this road of more personalization at scale. I think I think devices are going to get better and better. I mean, you are starting to see devices improve in their capabilities, and you're starting to see them be easier to use. You're starting to see them be more cost effective. You're starting to see them give you more guidance. A lot of these apps out there are starting to give you some direction, but I think we'll start to see more gyms, more trainers, more coaches be able to look at more information in a meaningful way. And if you're an athlete or you're trying to train home, I think we'll be able to pinpoint your weaknesses better. We'll be able to track your progress better. We'll be able to put all the pieces together better for you. There'll be improvements in personalized nutrition or personalized supplementation. There's all the genetics and the big projects around analyzing your genome, improve as well. And that happens faster and is cheaper. We get more insight about what trainings you'll respond better to. We get more insight about what nutritional things you'll respond to, which supplements might be more effective. I think we'll be able to just have better use of the data that we have, and the data we have will be easier to collect. So, I mean, I think we're headed that direction. I think it'll just continue to improve because we're still kind of in the early days.
Sure.
I think in technology, there's lots of devices out there. There's lots of information out there, but I don't think we're at the point yet where people are using it very effectively. It's kind of like the early days of the internet, right? Where you had just massive amounts of crazy websites but the browsing was terrible and most websites were terrible, but you had all this information. I think we'll see that more and more companies and more, devices will be able to facilitate just a better experience. Because I don't think the data is being used as effectively as it could be right now. And that's what my goal is, to help improve that. But I think we'll just continue to see that over time where, I can get a personalized program that's built around me and my needs and my goals. And I can have, a lot of automatically adjusted things happen in the background without having to spend hours storing through the data. And as a coach, that's what you want. You want something that's going to help you coach. I don't think we want to replace coaching. I don't think we'll ever replace the human element, but I think we'll be able to augment that. Coaches will be much better equipped. They'll be much better at adjusting programs if someone's not doing well. They'll be much better at tracking progress. They'll be much better at giving people guidelines about sleep and nutrition and all the mental stress things and all the other variables that affect programming and affect results. I think we'll just get better at putting all those lifestyle pieces together. And I think eventually we won't think of training as just a workout. We'll have much better context, understanding that fitness is 24 hours a day. It's not the hour a day in the gym. It's all those things that happen outside the gym as well. And coaches will approach it that way. I mean, I think Precision Nutrition's done a tremendous job of getting coaches up to speed and the importance of nutrition and how to incorporate some nutritional counseling in there. But there's always other things, like I said, there's sleep, there's mental stress, there's just how your body reacts to training. There's all these things that coaches need to be aware of. They need to understand how to coach, but it's not being taught, very effectively right now. It's not being incorporated. So I think we'll see all those things improve over time. And that's just where we'll eventually get to, is just a better effective use of data and technology in a way that's more compelling and more effective.
I love it. So if somebody is leery of tech or hesitant to get started with whether it's Morpheus or any of the other like fitness-based tech apps out there, what advice would you give them to get started?
Well, the first thing is just start really simple. I think it's easy to get intimidated by all the amount of devices out there. There's a million different devices out there, obviously, these days, and there's a million different apps out there. So just start really simple. I mean, I can tell you, if you were going to track, if I was going to say just track one thing and one thing only, honestly, I would say track sleep. And I would say, improve your sleep, I would say, is probably the most important thing. And if tracking it helps you do that, then that's the most important thing. But you don't have to be tracking 10 different things. You don't have to be sorting through spreadsheets of data. You don't have to be digging through mountains of reports. Just track one thing that you need to improve. And over time, if you improve it, then maybe you add a second layer of tracking. So really, to me, data and tracking is only as good as its ability to help you improve something. So I would just say, identify something that is your biggest weakness or your roadblock, your limitation, and then start tracking and focusing on improving that and using technology to do it. And as you start to see results, you'll be more effective at using that technology, and you may decide you want to add a second layer, or maybe you want to start tracking your activity, or maybe you want to start tracking your heart rate. So you want to start tracking your heart rate variability or whatever else. So if you're, sleep, I say, is because it's the easiest and most important. Beyond that, I would actually say heart rate variability is probably the most important thing. But for someone who's very new to tech, you have to know what you're doing when it comes to HRV if you're not going to use Morpheus. So I would just say start small. Start very simple. Find something you need to improve in your fitness game and start tracking it and trying to improve it. And over time, when you see the results of using that tech and it's helped you, then you'll be more open to using something else. But to me, like I said, your whole goal of tracking something should be because you want to improve it. And you want to make sure you're doing the right amount of it, whatever the case may be. So don't track something just to say you track it. Track something because it's a limiting factor in your fitness and your health. And then tracking it can help you improve it. And you start that standpoint and you just do one thing at a time, you'll get better and better at it. It'll be easier to you, because a lot of times people that do track too many things don't know what to do with it. And if you're not using something like Morpheus, it's just noise in the system. And then they don't know what to do with it and they stop using it, right? So just be mindful about what you're doing and tracking only what you want to track.
It's so funny that you say that, because a couple of weeks ago I had Chris Barnes on here, and not that I expect you to know who Chris Barnes is, but he's basically the guy that brought sports science to the EPL. Right. Mm. And his main point with all this was, we've gotten so caught up in collecting more and more data, we've gotten away from the insights that we need to get from the data to make it valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think teams are the worst of that. There was a time where if you had a technology, you knocked on a sports team's door, they're like, here's a check. Like teams basically were in this race to collect data against each other. And so teams were collecting just insane amount of data, from GPS to heart rate variability to tracking data for heart rate data, activity. I mean, they were tracking anything and everything, and some of them still are. And he probably talked about this to the point where it's they had 2 or 3 people whose job it was just to track data, look at data, make sure devices work. They were spending $200,000 a year on salaries of just the guys to look at the data. And at the end of the day, 90% of the time, the head coach didn't give a shit. The head coach was not making decisions based on that data. And Dave Tenney has great stories about this. For those of you that don't know, Dave Tenney he worked for the Seattle Sounders for a number of years, worked down to Orlando Magic, and I can't remember where Dave went now.
Austin FC.
There you go. So Dave, in my mind, is one of the best at collecting data in a meaningful way, making sense of it, and giving information back to the head coach to help the coach make decisions. He's phenomenal at it. He's been doing it a long time. He was one of the first people who came back in 2007 or maybe earlier, who was looking at Megawave and wanted to test it out. And did a bunch of stuff with Dave to look at that, and he's really, really good. But he's got all kinds of stories where he'd run some pretty sophisticated models. He was bringing people from Microsoft to run these models of data and go back to the head coach and say, like, here's how much a practice impact our players relative to a game. And he would say, here's my projected probability of injury of these players, which would be a low magnitude. Maybe injury rate was like risk was like 1% or 2%. That's still a really high number, but you got to realize it means that 99% of the time that player's not going to get injured in the game, right?
Right.
So he goes through all of this data and spend all this effort, and he'd go back to head coach and be like, hey, this guy's a really high risk of injury for the game, which again might be like 3%, which is really high risk in the grand scheme of things. But player goes out and has a great game, and the coach goes, "Your stuff doesn't work." Like so much for your technology. He had a great game,
Right.
But it was, the risk of 3% injury was 97% chance he wasn't going to get injured.
Right.
So coaches at the top level, they vary in their own comfort with technology and their own ability to want to use it. And so I think you had this huge disconnect, particularly in the sporting world, but in everyday people as well, where you just had thousands of dollars and massive amounts of man hours being spent on collecting and analyzing data. And then by the time it got to the head coach, the head coach is like, I'm not going to listen to that crap. I've been coaching my whole damn life. I don't need the damn technology to tell me what to do. And that's just kind of the mentality, Or, I had this another quick story for you. We worked with the San Francisco 49ers briefly when Chip Kelly was there. Push strength is a variable BBT device.
Yeah.
And they basically brought in to develop a questionnaire and some BBT data and some things Chip Kelly wanted from his coaching experience. And then I came in to help put together the heart rate variability piece. And they spent months and months building out this huge dashboard, this huge reporting system, collecting heart rate variability and BBT and GPS and collecting just massive data. And Chip Kelly, to his credit, really wanted it summarized into a very simple, easy to understand format. And he wanted it presented to his coaches. Like, it was a really well thought out system. It was really well done. And in my experience, it was one of the best I've seen. But Chip Kelly got fired in a year.
Oh my gosh.
It was gone. Like, I think the system took longer to build and implement than Chip Kelly even coached for.
Wow.
He was gone. And by the time he was gone, like, that data was gone. And the next coach that came in, I think it was Shanahan or whoever it was, just tossed the whole thing out. Didn't want it. Was not his background. Didn't understand tech. Got rid of the entire thing. So you just saw this crazy thing, and you still see it in coaching, where every team and every coach looks at stuff completely differently. But anyway, it goes back to what Chris said. It is. There's just this massive amount of data that people collect just for the sake of collecting without actually using it. So that's my biggest piece of advice is, if you're going to collect data, use it for something. And that's why I'd say use it to track something that you feel like is a problem area. If you don't get enough sleep, you don't get enough sleep, tracking can help you see that. If you don't track anything in conditioning, heart rates can help you understand what your conditioning is doing and whether or not you are improving and all those sorts of things. So use data that is going to help you improve something that you need to improve. Otherwise it is just going to be noise in the system that's not really going to do anything for you. For sure.
Okay, last one. Talk to me about Recover to Win. What's it about? Who's it for? What prompted you to create it?
Yeah, Recover to Win. So it's a course I'm working on releasing here very shortly. That's just going to help everyone put all these pieces together that I've talked about. So I built this model over the years, from looking at data and just from coaching people and figuring out what are the big main factors that impact people's recovery and therefore their fitness. And so it's basically 5 things. It's movement, so that's activity, training, sleep, regeneration strategies, and just overall recovery. So and nutrition. So move, train, eat, sleep, regenerate. Those are the 5 things. And so I put together this course to help people understand how to do all those things better and how to look at, again, fitness as the 24 hours in a day, not just the one in the gym. And so it's a great course. You contributed some to it. Dr. Mike Rousseau contributed the nutritional side, but it's just meant to help people put all these other pieces together, not just the workouts, in a way that's going to help them improve not just their conditioning, but whatever it is they want to improve, their strength, their body composition, their health, all those different things. So I've got all these 5 different modules, that go through how do you understand nutrition from a recovery standpoint, how do you incorporate breathing into your training and cool downs, how do you monitor heart rates, how do you use technology to do all those things, how do you improve your sleep, how do you use some of your regeneration strategies and tools that are out there. It's just the big picture of recovery in a way that I don't think anyone else is teaching. I think right now there's a lot of information about recovery, but a lot of it's kind of scattershot just by the companies that are producing the devices,
Right.
or it's just a technique here or there, or go do an ice bath, go do Wim Hof breathing, like stuff that's may or may not be useful, but it's just kind of thrown out there in the wind. There's no structure or organization to it. It's a very shotgun-based approach to recovery right now. I think people don't have a really good grasp on how all these things fit together, or how to actually build a recovery program, a recovery strategy that's going to help them get better. And so that's what the course is all about. I'm really excited about it because I really do think it's going to make a huge difference in the way people approach training. And I've been kind of doing this for a few years now, where people would come to me. I'm sure like you, I get quite a bit of emails and people say, "Hey, can you build me a program? And can you write me a program?" And a lot of times I don't do one-on-one programming. It's just not something I'm available for these days. But a lot of times I'll get some interesting cases where people ask for a program, and I'll kind of look at what they'll say. Well, send me what you're doing. And I'll look at it and I'll say, "I'll tell you what, I'm not going to give you a program. Or a training program at least. I'm going to give you a recovery program." And I'll do a little bit of consulting back and forth on just picking out a couple of things I know they're going to make a huge difference. And I'll tweak 2 or 3 things in their recovery side, not the training side. And then they'll come back to me and they'll be like, "I can't believe how much my results improved. Like, I didn't change my training program at all, but all of a sudden my strength shot to the roof, or all of a sudden, my conditioning got so much better, or all of a sudden my injuries, seem to take care of themselves." And so once you start to unlock these things, again, that are happening outside the gym that are limiting your results, you can see massive differences that you never expected to see. Like, all of a sudden, the hard work you put in the gym is actually paying off, because the limiting factor was not sets and reps or exercises. Your limiting factor was, your sleep or your nutrition or how you deal with mental stress or whatever else. And so once you see that, you just realize how powerful it is and how much it's a missing component of a lot of people's bigger pictures. So, like I said, I'm excited to bring it out there because I know it's going to make a big difference in the way people approach these things. And it's going to help them, finally get the results that they could have been getting all along if they would have been able to put these pieces together. So like I said, it's coming out in a couple of weeks. It's a video course. It's a printable workbook that comes along with it. And, I'm really excited about it. And then obviously getting guys like you and Dr. Mike on board make it even better. So super excited. I'll be coming here next couple of weeks.
I love it, man. Yeah, I can't wait to check it out because, I just think you alluded to it before, but the difference between like training and working out, or having a program and working out, it's the same thing with recovery. So often now there's no thought process to recovery or how training can facilitate recovery. It's just like, oh yeah, I'm not feeling good. Like you said, go do an Epsom salt bath or go do a sauna, with no real rhyme or reason to it, versus like, hey, how can we put all these pieces together to make something that is very fluid, that's going to make sure these people are recovering well, so that the training that they're doing actually gets results. Like, that's what it comes down to.
It does. I think we just need to have a fundamental shift, which I hope I can help facilitate. I'm going to do everything in the gym I can to stimulate my body to get better. And then I'm going to do everything outside the gym to help my body actually realize those gains, right? You're creating the potential for improvement in the gym, but you're realizing that potential by what you do outside the gym. And that can't be, like you said, just this random ad hoc, stuff where like, oh, I feel sore here, so I'm going to go hyperice, or I'm going to go Theragun. Those things are valuable. Like, there's nothing wrong with those things, but it's got to be done in more of a structure. And there's more to it than that. It's when do you eat how do you time your foods around your workouts? It's how do you manage your sleep effectively? How do you deal with the mental stress side of the game? How many steps should you actually take? How many calories should you actually try to burn a day? How should you manage a big picture of your training? There's just so many pieces in there that drive the results of the gym that aren't being dealt with in an organized or intelligent way. And to me, again, a lot of those are the missing links in fitness right now. It's that we've programmed things to death. Like, there's endless things about programming, but there's almost nothing out there that teaches you how to do everything else outside of that. And again, those things are just as important, if not more important, because again, they come back to, do you actually see the benefits of the workout? That's not just one question. It's the question. It's how do we get the best result possible for our work? And that is where recovery is the essential answer.
Absolutely. All right, man. Last but not least, lightning round. So 4 fairly short questions. Your answer can be as long or short as you like. Ready?
Yep.
All right. Number 1, how's Hawaii these days?
Dude, Hawaii is awesome. How's Hawaii every day? 80 degrees and sunny most of the time. You get some little rain stuff here and there, but Hawaii is awesome. As you know, I'm out here for the winter time, and when you compare Seattle to Hawaii or the Midwest, and where a lot of people are in the middle of winter, it's paradise out here. So I love Hawaii. I particularly love the North Shore of Hawaii, up in area called Haleiwa, and all the major surf spots, Bonsai Pipeline and Waimea and all this stuff. So I love Hawaii, even though I'm not a surfer, at least not yet. It's a place to be the winter time, if you ask me.
You beat me to it. I was going to ask if you were a surfer. Okay. Number 2.
Not yet.
Are you flying anything new these days? Just helicopters, planes, or are there new things with wings that I don't know about?
I mean, if there was, I'd fly them, to be honest with you. But No, I mean, I did find a helicopter in Hawaii to fly, which was a feat in of itself. So I've been flying around here quite a bit. But I mean, you can fly gliders. I've flown gliders a bit, but gliders are kind of boring, honestly, when you compare them to helicopters and airplanes. So they're not my preferred. I mean, if there was something else to fly, if it's a wingsuit or something that could pull that off, I probably would give it a shot. But still sticking to helicopter and airplanes, just doing it in a different spot. And Hawaii's a really cool place to fly. There's all kinds of stuff to fly and see around here.
Oh, I bet. Okay, number 3, switching back to MMA. Who's your favorite fighter to watch right now?
You know what? I would say it's still Demetrius Johnson, a guy I worked with for a long time. I still think he's the best all-around combination of skill and athleticism out there. I mean, there's definitely some new guys, Adesanya is fun to watch and some of the younger UFC guys, but I just don't think they have the same overall level of skill that DJ does. And I still like the old school fighters, I'll be honest with you. I loved Fedor. I liked watching Chuck Liddell. Yeah. I loved watching Vanderlei Silva. It was super fun to watch. Rampage. I mean, I really liked it.
It was like the Wild West, dude. It was so much fun back then.
It was so much fun to watch. And to me, those guys just had so much personality. Like, they were fun as shit to watch. I mean, like Conor McGregor has kind of been the guy that's had a big personality, everyone to watch because of his mouth. But to me, like the old school guys were so much more fun to watch, and the old school Pride, and even the old school UFC. I remember being at like the Chuck Liddell fights in Vegas, and it was awesome. Like it was just so much more exciting. I think their characters were more fun to watch, and their fights were awesome. So I don't know. I mean, the UFC it's still fun to watch, and I still watch some fights here and there. But I'm not as much of a casual fan in that sense as I used to. I used to watch all of them, and I just I've definitely reduced how many UFCs I'm watching because I think they've become watered down. They have
there's so many of them now stuff. Too. I feel like there's like every other weekend.
There's a lot of them, and they don't have the same level of exciting fighters that they used to. I think those have kind of gotten washed away with the number of fights they've had and the way the games kind of changed in a way it almost makes it more boring. And I think the UFC rewards it in some way because if you lose half your purse and you can get cut by the UFC. Yeah. And that's a discouraging factor to try to wing it and go for the win. If that if you can win on points and you can keep your career going, you're going to do that versus potentially losing not just a fight but getting cut by the UFC because you have one bad fight or you lose half your purse. So that's a whole other discussion. But I would just say I think the old school fighters were a whole hell of a lot more fun to watch. But these days I'll still watch DJ obviously, and he's still in my mind the best combination of skill and athleticism. Like I said, Fabiano Fernandez, another guy I've trained a long time, is fun to watch and great fighter as well. But I still miss the old days, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Okay. Number 4. Last but not least, what's next for Joel Jamieson?
What's next? Well, really, it's getting this Recover to Win course we just talked about out there, and then getting the Morpheus coaching platform, which I know we've talked about, and being able to really further the technology side of things in a way that's meaningful and solve that problem of how do you make data useful for coaches and useful for everybody. And I think that's my big focus right now is being able to do that, because I think technology has played a role in so many parts of our life. I mean, I can go online right now and order food to my house in 20 minutes. I can go on Amazon and get stuff. If I'm in Seattle, at least I get stuff on Amazon in an hour. I mean, I've literally gone down to Amazon.com or the app, and it has stuff from Amazon to my house in an hour. I mean, it's ridiculous. So wow. In a lot of ways, technology has made our lives more convenient. It's made our lives easier. We can communicate with people all the way across the world on Skype or Zoom and see each other. I mean, there's all these things that technology has been able to do to help us, just have more convenient life and better communication, all these sorts of things. But in fitness, I think it's added some elements, but it hasn't had the same level of impact as it should. There's gyms out there that put heart rates up on the screen, but they don't really help the training program. There's people that measure things, but they aren't really making a difference. I mean, I think we have to take a leap forward if we're going to push the fitness industry forward and help people actually improve their lives. Because at the end of the day, I still think we're seeing a lot of the same problems with fitness that we've always seen, and how do you keep people engaged? How do you keep them coming back, time and time again? How do you help them see consistent results? How do you help them actually change their lifestyles outside the gym? How do you do all these things? And technology, to my mind, hasn't really had a major impact in the way that it potentially could and should. And so my goal is to essentially help change that. So, I would say that's really my focus, and what I'm hoping to be able to do is move things forward. I
love it, man. Well, Joel, it's been great catching up with you as always. Where can my listeners find out more about you and all the work that you're doing?
Yeah, just number8weeksout.com, the best place to find me. And it's funny, I was sitting years and years ago before I started the site, or right when I started the site, we were sitting down in a sushi place we used to go to with all the fighters all the time. And then we were training Rich Franklin, and his sidekick, George Gurgel, was also a UFC fighter, a Brazilian black belt. And I was like, I think I'm going to start a website. And they were like, why? What are you going to do? And I was like, I'm going to write about, training you guys and fighters. And they're like, what are you going to call them? I'm like, I don't know. And George goes, 8 weeks out. I was like, 8 weeks out. I kind of like that.
That's cool.
that was a random name. And so I ran into him, I don't know, a couple of years ago at a fight somewhere. He's like, "Where's my royalty, man? Where's my
That's right.
I'm like, yeah, I'll give you, how about this? I'll buy you lunch. We'll call it even. But it was just this random lunch, where he said 8 weeks out, and it just kind of stuck. So 8weeksout.com is where you guys can find me, and then /recover to win if you want to learn more about the recovery course that I mentioned. But yeah, sometimes you just randomly, same thing with Morpheus, the app now. I was just driving down the street one time trying to think of names. I was like, Morpheus, that's a really good name. And I was asking my girlfriend, like, what do you think? She's like, that's terrible. And she did not get it. And I was like, no, it's not. I like it. And so I just, stuck with it. So sometimes, names or brands or things you come up with, like they just come to you and you like it or you don't, and you go with it. So I didn't do a bunch of, research. What boggles my mind is some companies will spend like $200,000, testing
market research.
Market research. Yeah. I mean, literally, if you go to a company and you say, hey, we want to do market research, you could spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for a report basically on the day that just gives you their information. But so far I've just kind of picked things that work for me and gone with them, and it's paid off well enough so far. So
I mean, between
.com is
I was going to say between 8 weeks out, Bioforce, Morpheus, I would say your names and your websites have done all right so far. So
yeah, it worked out well, and I like Recover to Win too. I think Recover to Win is
yes.
It's a good name, and it's accurate. So I think people will enjoy the course, and the name will help that.
Absolutely. Well, Joel, thanks again for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Anytime. I'm always game. I think this is the, I don't know, third or fourth time I've been on your show.
Yeah, it's been a few, but I mean, I wouldn't ask you back if it wasn't great stuff, man.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, and wish you guys well, and everyone else who's listening, getting through these tough times and come out the other side stronger than before.
All right, my friend, that does it for this week's show with Joel. Really hope you enjoyed it. I know he's a guy that I love catching up with, and I can tell you, honestly, every time we sit down and chat, either within the show or something we talk about just loosely before the show starts, man, I take something away from this guy's work every single time we get together. So really hope you enjoyed the show. Hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, do me one favor, subscribe to the show right now. Wherever you listen to podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon, basically anywhere you can consume podcasts, you can subscribe so that you know each and every week when we drop a new episode. So my friend, as always, thank you so much for your support. Love and appreciate you, and we'll be back soon with our next episode. Take care.